This is a review of the Speedy Stitcher sewing awl, which I brought on my 2018 through paddle of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. So this is the Speedy Stitcher made by, you probably can't see that, but by Stewart Manufacturing Incorporated, made in USA. Those are my initials. And so let me show, it's put away right now. Let me take it out and I can show you what it looks like. So here's the Speedy Stitcher taken apart. So we have the chuck piece which goes on the end. Then here we have a fine needle with some wax thread, which is not the one that they sell, but is a different one. Inside here we have all the spare needles stored. And then in the back we have a bobbin filled with the thread, and then this cap piece which goes on and holds the bobbin in. So now I'm going to put it together. So here's the Speedy Stitcher ready for action. We've got the fine needle and the fine thread. And then back here again is the bobbin with the cap. And this is basically a small handheld sewing machine, and which allows you to punch through very thick material. So up here is a leather strap from my Duluth pack. It's probably about an eighth of an inch thick. The sewing awl with the heavy-duty needle could easily punch through 2 layers, potentially more, of this leather, which would be very hard to do with just a hand needle. So I'm making this review because I think so highly of this small, simple machine, which if I had not brought it on this trip, there would be a lot of issues that I would have come across and not been able to fix, which you'll see shortly what those. Okay, so here I have my Keen sandals that I brought, and you can see this gray stitching. That's what I did. This started to pull out back here, and this one isn't too bad. Let's see, it started to pull out even past my stitches too, but yeah. But the sewing awl allowed me to reinforce that, so at least it held for longer. This one finally gave out, but it looks like the other ones are holding all right. So I had to do that on all 4 sides of the shoes to keep them together. On my pants over here, there's 2 separate points I did it on. Before the trip, the pants were a little too big to wear without a belt. So I sewed up this seam right here, which I could have done on a sewing machine, but the sewing machine wasn't working. And I knew that if I did it with a Speedy Stitcher, it would not give out. So I did that on both sides to tighten up the waistband a little. And then the other place I did it was on one of these pockets. Let's see, this one. I think, no, yeah, this one. So that seam started to give out, and I was able to go between the outside and the inside of the pocket in order to sew that seam up to keep it from going further. Next on the docket, my knife sheath. So this is a Mora knife in a bastardized sheath. And in here, see, this snap ring came off. And so instead of throwing it out or trying to use duct tape in some ingenious way, instead I was able to use the Speedy Stitcher and just sew it back on. Up here, so this is a corner of my shelter, which is a Friendly Swede mosquito netting and ripstop nylon bottom. And you can, needed to put some extra loops on, so I was able to use my Speedy Stitcher to just sew this string right on to the ripstop nylon. Next up, my camera case. So on this side you can see it was attached to this metal piece. I pulled too hard on one side, and the metal piece came off and popped into the water. It used to be attached down here. So instead I just used the Speedy Stitcher to sew this strap back onto the case. Haven't had a problem since. On my bug shirt, all on the right side, I don't know why, but there were a couple places where I tore the netting, excuse me. There And here I got smart and started sewing it on the inside as opposed to the outside. But there were 3 points that were pretty big holes that I needed to fix. So this is my little seat that I had, aluminum and canvas, and I got a little ember on the original light green canvas that was getting bigger and bigger. That hole was getting bigger and bigger as the days went by, so I decided it was time to patch it with a scrap piece of canvas I had, and it hasn't caused any problems since. Now, where this Speedy Stitcher really came in handy the most, though, was on the Duluth pack. So before the trip even began, this Duluth pack and the Speedy Stitcher have had a long relationship. So this Velcro for my map case was sewn on with the Speedy Stitcher. This whole top pocket was sewn on with the Speedy Stitcher. So you come in right here. These side pockets were sewn on with the Speedy Stitcher. And there are a couple big patches on the bottom. You can see that this patch on the bottom was sewn on with the Speedy Stitcher, and this patch on the bottom was sewn on with the Speedy Stitcher. And once the trip began, the great thing about the Speedy Stitcher was if I got a tear or something, I wasn't up a creek because I didn't have a heavy-duty sewing machine with me. I did, it just happened to be small and handheld. So here's a small patch I put on in the field when I got a hole. I got a more serious tear, and a trail angel donated this scrap piece of canvas, which I put on there. There was this leather strap started to go. You can see over here, it used to be just like this, and see how it's starting to crack? Well, this one started to tear across, and so I just took a scrap piece of leather and sewed it on there with a Speedy Stitcher, reinforcing the area that was going to break. I did another reinforcement up here. So this was right where I lifted the bag all the time, and you can see maybe right in there it's starting to tear. So I just took this piece of leather and sewed it here and sewed it here to reinforce it, and that tear hasn't gotten any worse since then. And so yeah, so there's that patch, and there's another small patch right there. So it almost wasn't a question of if I needed the Speedy Stitcher. It was more a question of when I got to camp, what am I going to need to use the Speedy Stitcher to fix today? So part of that, I think, is a result of using older materials that are maybe not as rugged as modern day materials. But the beauty of using this old stuff is that it's a lot easier to fix than modern materials might be. So again, the Speedy Stitcher, definitely worth its weight in gold on my trip. I went through a whole bobbin, and you saw about how much was left on this bobbin, and that was just in the last that was in the last 2 weeks, and that was after a lot of the things that had torn or broke had already happened. So I definitely use this a lot and would highly recommend it. It's not expensive, and I'll leave a link in the description to this, and a good made in America product. So again, that's my glowing review of the Speedy Stitcher Sewing Awl by Stewart Manufacturing. I would highly recommend it for anybody going into the backcountry as a way to stay safe and keep your stuff working even after it breaks. And especially if you're somebody like me who likes to make and maintain your own gear. So thank you for watching, and be sure to check out my other videos.